All right, I think I'm going to start off here. I am Jan Shalkowski. I am the Assistant Director here at the NCEC, and this is our 10th annual UNCG Entrepreneur Day, and the first time that we have tried to do this virtually, and I'm really excited that so far it seems to be going pretty well. I want to welcome today our speaker, Jasmine Beard. Jasmine is a Greensboro native and a 2010, UNCG alumni who started her company after having over 18 years as project management experience and several years in service to our community via appointment to nonprofit executive boards. She's passionate about achieving seemingly impossible, ambitious goals, projects and goals, and supporting her clients in accomplishing their goals. Jasmine's currently serving her second term as the president of the Greensboro JCs and returning as vice chair for Triad Adult and Pediatric Medicine. In addition to her global work and travel experiences and speaking 4 languages fluently, Jasmine is an alumna of Leadership Greensboro for 2020 and has recently received the following recognitions: 2020 Minority Small Business Person of the Year by the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce, 40 Under 40 of Triad's most influential 40 African Americans, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading this morning, by Black Business Inc. magazine, and the NC Junior Chamber International Top 5 Chapter President. So welcome to Jasmine, and I hope you get a lot out of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, so much. Great morning, everyone. I would like to engage with my audience. So I'm going to share my screen, but before I do, while I get my screen ready, those of you that have the capability to write or type in the chat, if you will, actually not even write in the chat, I'm sorry. If you have something to write with, if you will write down the top 3 things that come to your mind when you're thinking about your future and your success. And while you do that, I'll go ahead and pull up my screen. And Jan, can you, while they are writing down their what comes to mind or their thoughts, can you tell me if you can see my screen, please?
Yes, I can see you.
Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, so if everyone has had the opportunity to write down, what comes to mind when you're thinking about your success, I will come back to that later in the presentation and talk about why I had you do that. And just keep in mind, be as honest and transparent with yourself as possible during that activity. So we are talking about communication essentials today. It will be a bit of a twist, but communication is important for so many reasons. And for me, communication and the different facets of communication was how I began to create and build opportunities for myself that I couldn't have even imagined on my own. So I'll start by introducing myself. Again, I'm Jasmine Beard, Chief Strategy Consultant of AJOY Consulting. I'm a Greensboro native, so I was born and raised here, which I find to be quite rare these days. I graduated from UNCG with a double major, International Affairs and Development, and a second major in Spanish. I am a polyglot, as Jan mentioned earlier. The languages that I am fluent in are French, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. And I am a proud mommy. I was kind of skeptical about saying the word proud, but yes, I am a proud mommy. And growing up, I was very shy. Many find that hard to believe, especially if you did not know me when I was much younger. But yes, I was very shy. And I'll give you a little bit of a backstory about that. So growing up, I had kind of social anxiety. I enjoyed being around people, but I always felt nervous I felt like I was at a loss of words. And I was so shy that if I was in the room, you would never know I was there unless you looked to see if I was still sitting there. Um, and throughout life, I realized how I missed out on a lot of opportunities by not speaking up and saying anything and not communicating or advocating for myself. Um, and if you can just raise your hand in the chat or type yes, how many of you have seen an opportunity that you wanted, you missed out on it because you didn't say anything? That happens quite often. And when I saw that, a lot of times I would see where someone got an opportunity and I would say, well, looking at the results, I could have done a better job. But then I had to self reflect and I looked internally and said, well, Jasmine, if you spoke up, maybe you would have had that opportunity. So moving forward, that began to serve as a catalyst for something in me that changed, that began to spark my drive and ambition to get out of my comfort zone. One of the funny things that I used to do, or not so funny, but I would tell people, I started learning how to speak to strangers in the elevators. One, it wasn't a lot of people. And if the person never spoke back, the embarrassment was minimal. So that was one of the first tasks I did to take it upon myself to begin getting out of my comfort zone in dealing with social anxiety. And then that led to lots of new opportunities. So we'll fast forward to a few years and just talking about entrepreneurship, a lot of what I'm explaining is things that I've learned and best practices or concepts that I use as an entrepreneur that have helped me persevere through the journey. As many will tell you, it's not an easy journey, but it's very rewarding and it's so worth it. So in elementary, middle school, and high school, as I would like for you to type in the chat and guess, what do you think I sold when I was in school? Like, what are some of the things that you all, and feel free to take yourself off mute because this is more of a conversation instead of a formal presentation. I like to engage with the audience. Yes, chocolate bars. Sloan, you're absolutely right. For fundraisers, yes. Candy grams. Yes, candy, absolutely. So I sold candy. I sold T-shirts for my older brother. He was great at designing some apparel. And a lot of times he'd say, hey, go sell this at your school, because he knew I just had a way of just saying, hey, I've got this T-shirt that my brother's selling. You want to buy it? Mixtapes, all kinds of things. I was always selling something. And yet in college, I used to say I hated sales, right? So in college, same thing. I participated in plenty of MLMs, Mary Kay, Cutco, Arbine, Kirby, Noni Juice, Body Magic. And I'm not sure if many of you remember those, but if it was an MLM, I've sold probably over half of them. Learned a lot, but of course they were not very sustainable. One of the things, the most memorable entrepreneurial opportunities that I created for myself was, I see Jan, Avon. My mom did Avon as well. In college, I often capitalized on Valentine's Day. I would go and get supplies to make baskets to sell for $20. And it would only cost me $8 to make the baskets. And I would sell them at the EUC during Valentine's Day because I was able to get a table as part of these student union organizations. So again, entrepreneurship has been a part of my entire life. When I was at work, people would joke and say, you're always popping your trunk. Again, I sold even when I was working in Bank of America and a few other corporate companies. Or even selling cell phones in college, during college. At work, I was still selling. I sold clothes, perfume, candy, you name it. If it was sellable, and someone needed it, a lot of times I would find a way to provide it. And as you can imagine, if you didn't come from a very wealthy family, you had to make ends meet. So after college, I began studying styling and cooking in Brazil. And I say that because, again, most of the money that I had when I studied abroad in Brazil, which was back in 2008 and right at the brink of the recession, I didn't have a lot. So my focus was to go study, get the best grades I could to come home so I could facilitate getting closer to graduation. And while there, I had another entrepreneurial endeavor, which was styling hair. And when they found out that I could cook, I laughed because they said, I thought you all only eat McDonald's in America, which it was jokingly, but unfortunately, a lot of times they see that in the movies. They don't see a lot of images of, at that time, they didn't see a lot of images of American people, especially American women cooking. It was McDonald's, Burger King, and a lot of fast food. So that afforded me the opportunity to save a lot of money when they found out that I was a pretty good cook. They bought the food and I cooked it. So that saved me money on groceries as a student. And then also being able to style hair was another form of revenue to support myself while studying abroad in Brazil. Fast forward, after college, I was pregnant with my daughter, leaving a job that I was at briefly. It was quite a highly stressful sales job. And when I left, a lot of my morning sickness was alleviated. So I supported myself through styling hair again, as well as translating and interpreting for consultants or either attorneys and also Latin American and families of African origin that spoke French, Portuguese, and Spanish. So my languages definitely came in handy and I leveraged them quite well. And then after a few years of doing that, I landed a job at a startup here. And about 3 or 4 months in that startup, I networked, met with a few of my mentors, and one became kind of like a godmother to me. And she spoke to me and learned about my background and said, "You're a hustler." That was the first thing she said. And I'll never forget that. She said, "You need to take that hustle to corporate America." She said, "I promise you it will work out." And so, when I applied for a position, an international graduate program, I was accepted and spent 5.5 years there. During the time in corporate America, I was promoted 4 times within 5.5 years. Luckily, I also got the opportunity to return back to Brazil in Curitiba, Paraná, which was the city I also studied at. So at that point, I felt like it was going back home away from home, and got to see some of my other friends back in that I studied with in the university. During my time in corporate America, at this stint, I often found, okay, I'm quickly being, promoted or transitioning from one role to the next every year, year and a half. And I started to feel this feeling of stagnation. And I had this feeling of, man, I feel like I'm getting bored a little quickly. And I started thinking, well, what is it that I can do long term that's going to keep my attention? So after applying for a few positions in corporate, I was looking at, I just said, I don't know if this next move, if I stay, is going to keep me here. And then it started to lead to other personal situations as far as, stress, as well as burnout. As anyone can imagine, if you've been burned out with a job or a particular career, then you definitely know what that feels like. It doesn't feel good physically, mentally, nor emotionally. But I started thinking, I said, well, if I'm this frustrated, then something has to change. So I started doing self-assessments. I've always been a big advocate for self-improvement, self-development, and becoming a master of self. And I'll explain why a little bit later. But once I started doing that, the 3 questions I asked myself was, what am I good? What am I good at? What do people come to me for? And what do I enjoy the most? And so those assessments that I took helped me solidify and clarify my vision and what my next step should be. And if you are in the midst of a career transition, or if you're leaving college, I would highly recommend that you do an assessment on yourself. So that way you're not just making any move or taking just any position That way you have some clarity in the decisions that you're making because you want to be satisfied and you want to enjoy what you do. So with that being said, in June 14th of 2019, I left corporate America to pursue my company full time. Prior to that, I did have my company, had my LLC, but I wasn't fully pursuing it and putting a lot of energy into it aggressively. But I realized that that was something that would make me happy. And I realized that consulting was, after researching that industry, I realized that consulting was something that I would enjoy a lot because I get to work on a wide variety of projects. It's not easy for me to get bored, and I'll always be in the state of learning. So, with that being said, that led to plenty of new opportunities, as well as the awards that Jan mentioned earlier that I did not know existed until I was nominated for those awards. So, we're going to change gears for a little bit. And if you all are still with me, can you type in the chat gears, please? All right. Awesome. Thank you. So, we'll talk about communication in various forms. Communication is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. And another definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary is information communicated to information transmitted or conveyed. So, communication is, we often hear that communication is not only what you said, but it's also what they heard and what they see. And there's an equation for communication. Does anybody want to take a guess at what the communication is? And please feel free to take yourself off mute. And Jan, do they have the capability to do that?
Yes, they should.
Does anybody want to take a guess of what the 73855 is? Okay, so okay, thank you, Dawn. She said not a clue. 7% of meaning is communicated through spoken word, which is what you said. 38% is through the tone of voice, how you said it. Growing up, my mom always says, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I say that to my daughter now. And 55% is through body language, which is why I added it's what they see. Because if I say, I'm excited, that doesn't convey my excitement. It shows that I'm saying I'm excited, but my body language, if you're seeing what my expression, it shows that you wouldn't be convinced that I was excited. So using some different adjectives about communication, it is so versatile. We can talk about communication in so many facets and so many perspectives of life. It's universal. Universal in the fact that, a smile around the world, typically, depending on how that person smiles, but in general, if you see someone smiling, you automatically assume that they are happy, regardless of what country they're in. You assume that they have some type of gratification or satisfaction with a particular event, person, or occurrence. Communication can also be informal, depending on who you're speaking with. And depending on the company culture or just where you are in the world. I'm going to move this just a second. Communication can be local. So one of my favorite examples is, when Northerners, and I have family from up north, they say, that word y'all. So communication definitely can be local, referring to the style of communication. Cultural. There are certain cultures where you have to go through a line of greetings before you can actually get to the conversation that you want to talk about. So in Mali, in the language of Bambara, you have to ask, and in a few other countries, you actually have to ask about the family their family members and their health and well-being before you can actually begin an official conversation. This is a fun one. Communication is very generational. I was just laughing with someone the other day that talked about the phrase "or nah." My younger brother is definitely Gen Z, and he asked me "or nah" one day, and I had no idea what that meant. But and if you are in a work environment or in a place where you're often in amongst various generations, I'm sure you can provide some examples of communication that and how it varies between different generations. Again, communication is global. When you are talking about time, I had an interview with a gentleman who was a film director for the movie The City of God, and we had to do the interview virtual, of course, and he was in Portugal. So when I started doing the promotions for that interview, I had to remind myself that the time frame that is here, I had to match and correspond that communication for the time frame that was going to be in Brazil, because I knew, I mean, Brazil and Portugal, because I knew that it would be communicated throughout his social media as well. And of course, regional communication is regional. The way people communicate here in the South is completely different than the Deep South and the Midwest and northern parts of the US. And we also have, of course, national communications, and then more formal. Again, from a cultural standpoint, when you're speaking to someone older than yourself in different languages, especially Spanish, for example, you will be speaking to them in a more formal tone, and someone closer to your age is going to be less formal. And then for us, it's more the level of familiarity. So the way you would speak to a senior management or someone in a professional manner would be completely different than the way you would speak to someone that you're more familiar with or a family member of. So communication is external, another adjective that I did not include intentionally. Talking about external communication. So the key here is, are you clearly communicating to others what you want and are looking to accomplish? I wanted to point this out because I found that to be a development opportunity for myself when I got frustrated, especially in my earlier years of corporate and work experience, and even sometimes in project management. If you can, by a show of hands or just type a yes in the chat, have any of you experienced sending out, let's say, 3 or 4 emails about a particular project or task that you're working on, and you get to the meeting and a person will say, either they don't have what you asked them for, or they'll say, when did you send that email, or I didn't get it. And I'll give you a second to type yes or no if you've had that experience. Yes. So I see that everyone can relate. So one of the things that I began doing, I said, well, if they are not reading or getting it, or if they're not providing what I need to deliver, maybe I need to be a lot more deliberate and intentional about my communication to others. And so the questions I typically ask when someone asks a request of me, or if I'm asking a request of them, are the questions that are listed here. What are you requesting? It allows them to be very specific, and again, holds myself accountable to be specific. Why am I requesting it? It allows facilitates understanding of what is trying to be accomplished here and what the impetus is, and who is the intended audience. As you know, depending on who you're talking to, your message will change. And then also, what is the intended outcome? That's important, because when you're looking at the intended outcome, then you can kind of work backwards to see what will be the easier or more efficient way to accomplish the task that you're looking to complete. And then also, how does the request benefit or impact the parties involved? That is critical, especially if you are looking to ask someone for something, whether it's funding, buy-in from stakeholders, or just, even with my daughter. I use this with my daughter quite often, and she uses it on me even better. So, but when I ask her to do something, I always try to explain to her how my request is going to benefit her and as well benefit me. So that creates buy-in and shows that I'm working to facilitate a win-win situation. And this one here I have asterisks by because I struggled with this the most is by stating when I needed something to complete it by. I remember asking someone to do something, and I would say, they'll say, well, um, I'll get this to you as soon as I can. And I'll say, okay, that's fine. But again, communication, it's what they said, what I heard, and a lot of times I couldn't see them if it was through email, but and then what I assumed that as soon as possible in my mind is different than as soon as possible in the other person's mind. So I felt like sometimes telling them when I needed it by was a little too demanding. So I learned to start asking. But telling someone your deadline is critical and important for various reasons. Of course, if you have a deadline, you want to give them a few days earlier than you need it in case changes need to be made. But also, if you're not clear on when you need something by, then you're definitely putting yourself or your project or your request at risk. So one thing I like to say is if you're unsure of what your deadline is, or if you're unsure about the exact terms because it's an ambiguous project that you're working on, the good thing is to come to an agreement, a mutual agreement with the person you're requesting from on that deadline. And when doing so, keep in mind your tone. Your tone and your word choices are critical. Again, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's important. It's in an old saying that I grew up with is you get more flies with honey than you can with vinegar and salt. And so the next thing I do is ask instead of saying I need this by tomorrow because I have to go and present to this executive team and we're looking to get them to approve the funding for this project. That's fine, but I have found in my experience by asking, sending an email greetings, would you mind speaking with me about a project that I have to present tomorrow to get buy-in from the executive team to fund this particular project? And then by asking, that allows them to see that you respect them, one, as a human being, you have consideration for their workload, and it empowers them to feel like they have the autonomy to one, manage their current workload as well as feel like they have contribution to the project. When you are, and the next one is staying away from entitlement words. When you are demanding something, a lot of times people don't take that well, especially if you're in a position of authority. You tend to get more from people when they feel like it's that even though you have authority, but they feel that what they're doing is they still have a choice in their contribution to the project. And a lot of times they're typically more eager to participate and engage as well. And as always, gratitude and appreciation. And I would even add sincere gratitude and appreciation is always welcome. Appreciation and showing appreciation of people and their work and their time, it goes a long way. So we're almost done because I want to really get into some questions that you all have. So if you all will just, take yourselves off mute and guess what the next word would be to complete the sentence. Communication is also. And if you don't want to speak, you can feel free to chat.
Internal?
I'm sorry?
Internal?
Yes. And there's another there's another I word aside from internal. Thank you, Sloan. Important. Intuitive, yes, that's good too. So intuitive, but communication is important. And the most important communication you will have is internal communication. And I say internal in reference to one's own self. And so I say that because, when you encounter someone and you're talking to them, or if they're talking to you and you're making this face because you're inside of your head, and that this was the perfect meme that I found to be quite, uh, I would say, exemplary of this situation. Her face doesn't look like she's pleased. And I remember my godmother coming in the kitchen one morning, and I'm talking to myself in my head about something that happened the next day. And I made a face that was similar to this one. But when she saw me, she thought that I was making the face to her. And again, I was having an internal conversation with myself. And I didn't realize I made that face out loud. So when I saw this meme, excuse the quality of the graphic, but I felt that this was the perfect example of how we can sometimes be so into our own mind and our own world that we don't realize that it's externalized through our body actions and gestures. So, yes, communication is also internal regarding one's own self. And I like to say foggy windows or foggy windshields can cause accidents. You might get somewhere, but it may not be where you want to be, and it won't feel so good. So, the key in communication is being clear about where you are going by getting clear on what you are telling yourself. And I say this because, in relation to entrepreneurship, I tell each person that I consult with, any person that I coach, or any client, or even mentees, your conversation with yourself is so important because it shapes your outlook on life, your success, your family, how you feel about yourself, and how you interact with others. And relationships are very important when it comes to entrepreneurship, but also a lot of times you have to be your own cheerleader. There's a lot more discussion and topics now, and even social media posts and commentary about how you have to be your own cheerleader. And there are sometimes you're going to be the only one rooting for you throughout the process of entrepreneurship and during your journey. So, where you are internally, mentally, physically, spiritually, even financially, holistically, you always have to be clear with yourself about where you are in your journey, where you want to go. And sometimes that clarity is going to be what gets you out of bed even on the worst days. So one of the things that I do when it comes to the conversation with myself and internally, especially when I'm embarking on a task or a project that's totally new, a new industry, or just something that's completely out of my comfort zone, I remind myself and keep my anxiety at bay by telling myself I am in control of my emotions, my actions, my thoughts, and decisions. And I remind myself that I am right where I am supposed to be on this journey, and I am the expert based on my experiences. This is one I use, especially when doing public speaking, especially on a topic if I haven't spoken on it before. A lot of times, I'm not sure if you are familiar with, they say that the statistic, I think, is high, over 90% of people who would rather die than speak in public. Um, I find it very interesting. Of course, I understand the nerves and the shyness and the vulnerability, but it's still very interesting that people would rather die than to speak in public. But I think for me, one of the things that helps the most is, reminding myself that I am the expert on everything that I have experienced, and our perspectives and our thoughts are directly related to what we have experienced in life, and our experiences lead to what our truth is. So, when talking about, or when you're faced with internal communication dilemmas or conundrums, ask yourself and check your mindset, which is very important. What are you telling yourself about yourself? What are you telling yourself about your family, your life, your friends, and your success? And so this is why I had you all write down what your thoughts were regarding your future. And many of you would assume are alone. So hopefully you were very honest with yourself regarding that. And then I just have a few questions about that you can ask yourself regarding, anytime you're making decisions on whether it's entrepreneurship or a big major decision. Again, your internal communication plays a huge part of that. So you want to ask yourself, what are your mind and body telling you when you're thinking about the decision? Are you feeling relaxed? Are you feeling anxious, worried, excited? Do you have stomach pains? When someone Dawn mentioned earlier, communication is intuitive. Absolutely. When you're feeling those different reactions from your body when you're in a certain situation or you're having to make a decision or working on a particular project or task, um, intuition kicks in strong. Sometimes we follow it and sometimes we don't. And as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to use your intuition a lot, and a whole lot. This was very, very vivid for me, especially while making the tough decision to leave corporate. But, and then I started thinking about all the positive things that I would gain by stepping into the unknown comfort zone of entrepreneurship. And so next would be, are you afraid? If you're afraid, then ask yourself why. List out what are the things you're afraid of, and then address those things. There's there's a YouTube video that I watched years ago. It says, set your fears instead of your goals. Because when you set your fears, you are more confident, you're more encouraged and empowered to go after your goals once you've addressed your fears. Are you capable? So this is a question of whatever it is you're looking to embark on. Do you feel that you're capable? If not, why do you feel you're incapable? And then that's often related to the imposter syndrome. Again, internal communication, things that you're telling yourself that may or may not be true. And what do you need to do to become proficient? Or in this case, if it's something that I'm not proficient at, then as an entrepreneur, it might be more feasible for me to outsource that particular task or skill set. And just remind yourself, no comfort zones are allowed, because there is no growth in comfort. Other questions you can ask yourself are, is it aligned with your goals, your core values and morals? If not, my advice would be to stay away from it. That's typically how I operate. I'm heavily driven by purpose and codes of integrity. And when I see that a project or if something that I'm involved with is not aligned with my goals and my core values, then I definitely will back away from it or decline. Also ask yourself, will you regret doing or not doing this particular task or even entrepreneurship? And that was a big question I asked myself. How would I feel if I didn't take this chance on myself? Yes, entrepreneurship full-time is scary, but sometimes for some people, leaving the house is scary. So either way, every day when you wake up, you're taking chances without realizing. So ask yourself, if you don't make this decision, how will you feel the rest of your life, and will you regret it? And last but not least, visualize the outcome and speak it into existence. So, there's a lot of talk and a lot of literature around visualization, manifestation. The perfect example for me, I was 22 in college. I was working as a translator for a bail bonds agent, and I actually was in the process of getting ready to lose a property that I had purchased at the time. And I said, well, I'm 21. I'm young. And I said, well, if I don't go and study abroad, then I don't know if this opportunity will ever come again. And so at that time, I was 22. I spoke into existence. I said, I will be in Brazil on my 23rd birthday. At that time, I had no idea how it was going to happen, when it was going to happen, and didn't even know that it was an option when I was going back to finish my degree at UNCG. So on my 23rd birthday, I was in Alice Bar in Curitiba, Paraná, having a great time with some friends and celebrating my birthday. So these are what I find to be very useful and helpful as an entrepreneur and as someone who enjoys getting out of my comfort zone. I do get scared, but I utilize all of these tactics and practices to keep myself above the dark zone and to persevere through the journey of entrepreneurship, and as well help others continue to grow outside of their comfort zones. And one thing I'll leave with you before we open up for Q&A is you only get one shot to write your life story, and it's up to you to determine your narrative. So with that, if you would like to keep in contact, or if you have any questions or want to reach out, feel free to reach me at jasmine.b@ajoytoconsult.com. I've also provided my Facebook and Instagram at AJOY Consulting. It's the same for both. And my website is AJOYtoconsult with the number 2.com. So if anyone has any questions, I am going to leave this up here just for a few more seconds, and I'll also put it in the chat shortly here so you all will have it. But please take yourself off mute if you have any questions for me or any feedback. I'd like to have dialogue with you.
Just to let everybody know, we are recording this and it will be available on the website. I'll send out to everyone who's registered what the address is and how to get the information. So make sure that you look for that too.
We do have one question. I'm going to stop the share so I can look into the chat and see more of everyone in the call. We said, I am curious to know how you prioritize between obligations, family, and your career goals. That's a great question. So a lot of my ambitions are driven by my family. My daughter, my company is named after her. Her name is AJOY. And also it's a joy doing what I do, and I strive to be a joy to do business with. So with that being said, she's ingrained in everything that I do. And even before I had children, I always said I hold myself accountable to be my child's first role model. So anything that I do, I always think about what would I tell my child if they were in this situation? Would I tell them to keep going? Would I tell them to stop? Or, would I tell them, no, you stay there, be comfortable, don't take that risk? If I wouldn't tell them that, then I wouldn't do it for myself. Balancing the obligations, I include my daughter in a lot. For those of you who are parents, children will do more of what we do than what we say. So they watch what we do. Even when you're using creative and colorful language, they will say it because they see you saying it. So my daughter comes to board meetings with me. I include her, and I'll talk to her about certain decisions and say, well, what do you think? Because it's my hopes that she would enjoy the company enough as when she gets older to want to transition into leadership in the role. And when I say, we're going to a meeting, I'll ask her, are you taking the meeting minutes? And I say, it's our company. It's not mommy's company, it's our company. So I include her in those because in today's time, it's not realistic to give that perception that we have, like hours on end just to be with family, especially if you want to sustain a certain type of lifestyle. So yeah, balancing or prioritizing, a lot of times I try to include my daughter in as much as possible. On my board meetings for the nonprofit, she comes with me, they know her. It also shows inclusivity. For those who have children that may shy away from opportunities because they feel like I have a family, I can't, those are for people who don't have children. It's to show them that no, we welcome real people. We welcome humans with families because a lot of times those are the people we need to invest in the community. And I don't know if I answered your question, Don, but feel free to follow up if I need to be more specific. Next question is, are you able to share who your typical clients are? So that's a great question. So typically my clients have been solo entrepreneurs, nonprofits, as well as I would say unofficially corporate America, because I treated every job position like it was a client. I feel like that was a large part due to my success in corporate America. I always treated each job position and each interview as if it were a client and a project task. Also, I have taught a couple of entrepreneurship courses at the community colleges for their small business centers. So I've done some business counseling for them. And I'm currently in transition. As I say, entrepreneurship is a journey, and transition to go global. So small to medium sized businesses that are in the IT industry, automotive, retail. And then, of course, there's always those anomalies and fun projects that I get to partake in as well. So with project management or strategic planning, you know, it's really, you're rarely out of work unless you're not working. You know, it's a very broad perspective. So and lots of opportunities in project management.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We still have 12 minutes. I was afraid that I was going to go over, so that's great.
I have one more if I can ask.
Absolutely.
Are you by yourself, or do you have teams of people behind you, or do you do everything? CFO, the whole.
So I would joke and say, when people say, "What do you do?" I do everything except for sleep. But I'm learning that is critical. No, I'm primarily solo on a lot of projects, but I do subcontract out a lot of projects. I love to try to work with the younger generations because I know that experience is a tough thing for them. But also I'm a big advocate for entrepreneurship. So I try to partner with them as often as possible to let them know that, hey, after college, if you don't get that corporate job that you might, desire, don't be afraid to explore entrepreneurship, because there's, just as many benefits and flexibility in entrepreneurship that you may or may not get when you're working in a traditional 9-to-5 position. So I do work with other consultants too, which is also fun because I call them iron sharpening sessions, but iron sharpens iron. And so we learn a lot from each other through those projects, which is a lot of fun. And I love working with people who have different backgrounds and experiences that open my eyes to a whole new perspective and way of thinking. How do I pick my contractors? So first and foremost is passion. That's what I look for. Whenever I'm referring people to someone, I look for passion. Money is good. Yes, we all have to pay bills, but I am very passionate about not only just my success, but whoever I work with, they have to want to win, and win in the sense that they're ready to do whatever it takes to make sure they achieve their goals and get the results that they're looking for. So whenever I'm working with someone and I hear them say, yeah, this is my fee, but if someone shies away from that, I still want to have a conversation with them, because even if I can't service them, I want to send them to someone who can. That is one of the first things I look for, is passion, a heart of service, and then also quality. Quality is very important. And then the experience. So this wasn't mentioned earlier, but I am certified in customer experience management, which is a huge and exciting industry. And basically what that entails is measuring how satisfied your customers or clients are with your service or product by recommending you to a family, friend, or colleague. And it's about how they experience you as an entire company. And that is very important. A lot of businesses undermine restaurants, any business in general, but there are times where these businesses undermine the importance of a person's experience and perception of you from the time they know that you exist to the time they interact with anyone in your company. And so for me, the experience I have with that person is also important as to whether I want to do business with them, and then, morals and integrity. So again, all around, I'm always driven by purpose, integrity, their moral code, character, their passion, and then if they have a heart of service to others. And because for me, I feel like they're going to they will put their best foot forward, regardless of what the dollar amount is. The next question is, have I found new challenges during COVID? And are my clients changing because of the pandemic? I have been in a unique situation. I can't be more grateful. I say this a lot, that I'm so grateful. During COVID, business picked up for me, primarily because I do offer event production as well. So a lot of my clients that I had for event production, yes, some did hold off because those events were so far late in the year and they did not know what was going to happen. So those conversations were tabled, and then there were some that said, "Hey, I know you can make it happen. What do we need to do to get this, virtual?" And so, in that situation, COVID, I would say, was more challenging on the mental side, from from a full-time entrepreneur to becoming a full-time entrepreneur and a full-time teacher. So when school shut down, I think that was the biggest challenge for me, is making sure that I was putting just as much energy into my daughter's education, having to be virtual, and making sure she had the work that she needed and that she was still motivated, and managing her mental well-being and her internal conversations and her external communication with myself, and how she was handling that. So I think the family side of things was more of a challenge for me during COVID, because with my clients, they were changing and adjusting. So it kind of gave me a little bit of breathing room business wise. So the demands kind of slowed down. But I would say that's where I experienced the most challenges. And then being more comfortable with doing social media live and digital, I would say that was something that I definitely worked on doing more of during this particular time. So we have about 6 more minutes. Okay. So it says, do you have the ability to do customer experience assessments and audits for other companies? Meaning she leads a biotech consulting firm, and it'd be great to get an assessment on how we are doing with a third party like yours. Yes, so I am certified. I'm certified through Medallia, their operational customer experience management. I would love to speak with you and follow up with you on that discussion. And thank you. I appreciate that. Dawn, thank you for your time. I appreciate you gifting me your time and attention today. Any additional questions?
If there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and let Jasmine go. This has been a great session. I really appreciate you taking the time to help us out. And like I said, don't forget, we will have this and all of the other sessions that we've held for our 10th annual Entrepreneur Day available online later on. Thanks again, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you. And I hope you all have a joyful day.